Welcome back to Let's Cook! Today I'm going to make two dishes I haven't eaten in quite some time. The first is mashed potatoes. For some reason I just haven't had any desire for them. As for the other dish, I'm not sure why, but I've been having meatloaf on the mind. And for fun, we're going to make it vegetarian with some Beyond Meat and tofu. There's a long parts list for this recipe inspired by binging with Babish. And what you're going to need are 2/3 of a cup of breadcrumbs, 1 cup of buttermilk, or in my case regular milk with a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, half of an onion, a stalk of celery, and a medium carrot, all of which are going to get grated, 1/4 of a cup of tomato paste, and some herbs. Here I'm using dried basil and dried thyme, about a tablespoon of each. And then we need 1.5 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. Though if you want to keep it truly vegetarian, you're going to need to find vegetarian Worcestershire sauce. Or you could use something like soy sauce or liquid aminos, which is what I'm going to use. We're also going to recruit 2 eggs into our meatloaf army. Our meatloaf mix is going to be 16 ounces of Beyond Meat and 14 ounces of firm tofu, drained and pressed. We're also going to need salt and black pepper to taste. Oh, and you're going to need a loaf pan. And to not forget the garlic powder, like I did when I was filming this. Oops. The meatloaf is also going to wear a tomatoey toupee, or as normal people call it, a glaze, which needs 2 teaspoons of honey, a half a cup of ketchup, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and 1 teaspoon of our tasty sauce of choice. The potatoes are going to need a lot of ingredients too. Are you ready? Do you have your notebooks ready? Okay. 2 pounds of good boiling potatoes, half a cup of heavy cream, 4 ounces of butter, salt and pepper to taste. Yeah, that's it. Although I will be using some specialized equipment in the form of a ricer. More on that later. For now, let's start loafing around. Give your 2/3 of a cup of breadcrumbs a good soaking in our 1 cup of not buttermilk and 1 tablespoon of vinegar. Adding 1 teaspoon of the garlic powder that I definitely didn't forget about, I swear, and then set this aside as we grate our vegetables. You can do that by hand or by food processor if you're lazy like me. And so we're going to grate the onion, carrot, and oddly enough the celery. I've never grated celery before, but hopefully it'll turn out great. And I'm also going to give the tofu a spin to give it the consistency closer to ground meat. Now we can throw everything into the bowl with our breadcrumb mixture. The veggies, the meat, the 1/4 cup of tomato paste, 2 tablespoons of the dried herbs, 1.5 teaspoons of liquid aminos, 2 eggs.
Almost at the same time. That was kind of cool, right? Someone tell me I'm cool, please!
A teaspoon of salt, and pepper to taste. Then have a crisis realizing that your bowl is way too small. Scrounge around for a larger one. Mix by hand, being careful not to mash your meat. At least that's what traditional meatloaf wisdom tells us. In a lubed loaf pan, place your delightful looking mix, and then turn it out onto a sheet pan covered in parchment paper. Be sure to take a moment to marvel at the raw loaf's breathtaking aesthetic.
It's so gross! It looks like a horror movie monster!
Bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes, during which we can mix up the glaze. And the glaze needs a half a cup of ketchup, 2 teaspoons of honey, 3 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, 1 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar, and 1 teaspoon of our sauce. After the first 15 minutes of baking are up, glaze your loaf with half of the glaze, bake another 15 minutes, glaze the loaf with the other half of the glaze, and then bake for another 25 minutes until it's done. Once done, move to a cooling rack and allow to cool before slicing. For the potatoes, we have peeled them, and I'm cutting them into discs and then into little pizza slices. I forget where I heard this, but apparently this is the best shape for boiling potatoes. Go figure. Cover your potato slices in cold water, bring to a boil, covered, and then remove that cover and maintain a simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes until they are easily crushed between a pair of tongs. As you may be aware, potatoes are full of starch granules, which swell when cooked. When these granules burst by overcooking or are broken up by, let's say, a blade, they tend to let out their starchy payload, leaning to the library paste style mashed potato that probably stopped me from wanting to eat them in the first place. The goal, therefore, is to gently separate each individual starch granule without rupturing them, and a ricer or a food mill is the best tool for the job. And bonus points, it reminds me of those Play-Doh hair things, or maggots. Let's ignore that second one. Season with salt and pepper to taste, and add our half a cup of dairy and our 4 ounces of butter, which has been melted into the dairy. Serve immediately. Don't forget to plate up and make everything look nice for the camera. Smile!
Ta-da! Here we have it. There's a cat weaving between my legs. Sophie.
It's Sophie.
No? Okay. So here we have it. Our Beyond Meatloaf, our extra creamy mashed potatoes, and steamed broccoli. Always gotta have a little bit of green on the plate. And I think I'll start with the meatloaf. Wow, that is not holding together the best. But how does it taste? It's very wet, which I imagine is because of the tofu. But it tastes alright. Meat-like. It tastes dilutely of meat, I think I would say. Let me actually get a bite with the ketchup glaze in it. Yeah, that's better. I do wish it had a bit more of like a kick. Yes, because kicking is something you do with your hands. I wish it had more of a punch, because otherwise it's kind of soft and good. It needs a little bit something extra. And if I was to remake this, I would press out the tofu more, and I probably wouldn't process the vegetables the way I did, because that causes them to release more water, which is probably why it's a little stodgy. And then we have our mashed potatoes. Get that out of there. That was to make it look pretty, okay? I don't want it. There's supposed to be parsley. All I had was cilantro. I don't want cilantro on my mashed potatoes. Not bad. It's actually a lot smoother than I thought. Doesn't linger. It almost like dissolves in your mouth. Best mashed potato I've had in years. I do think it needs a little something though, like some fresh herb, like dill. And if I wanted a bit more texture to it, I would have done a couple of waxy potatoes in there as well. Maybe even keeping the skins on to provide a bit of textural contrast. Steamed broccoli! Yeah, that's steamed broccoli. But hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Now before I go off panel to actually eat my supper, let me take a moment to thank you for watching this episode of Let's Cook. If you have any suggestions for other episode ideas, or maybe improvements to these recipes, how would you make my meatloaf less stodgy? How would you reflavor the mashed potatoes? Do you have a secret method to steam broccoli any better than the microwave? You should let me know and contribute to my culinary knowledge. And thank you again for stopping by. I hope you have a spectacular day.